Hello and welcome to Who's On Next, where red means stop and green probably tastes like apples. Today I have a guest known for being the voice of Sonic, Shadow, and Jet. Cilan from Pokemon and Usagi Yojimbo from the 2003 Ninja Turtles is Jason Griffith.
Hey, what's going on, Michael?
Not much. I've been doing good being stuck in a house for months.
Great. That's like the best case scenario. If you can do well during this time, I think you'll thrive and you'll do well. But there's a lot of people that aren't, and it's really harrowing. But we all have to do the best we can.
Yep. I gotta say. So, what is it that got you into voiceover?
I've probably told this story 100,000 times now, but maybe it changes every time. Who knows? I moved to New York when I was 17. I was doing a show, Goosebumps Live on Stage.
Ooh.
With it was a national tour. So we started in New York, and I was doing my senior year of high school on tour, and we were going from city to city, and then we got abruptly canceled. And I moved back. I went back to Cleveland, finished the rest of my high school, and immediately, I think 3 days after I graduated high school, I jetted back out to New York and started auditioning. And in the beginning, I was just auditioning for on-camera stuff, lots and lots of commercials. I hardly ever booked a commercial, and TV stuff, film stuff, and then. One day my agent just submitted me for I think it was a Mercedes-Benz commercial, although I can't remember for sure, where they needed this cheesy game show host sound for voiceover. And at the time I had an answering machine, so I'm really dating myself here. And on the answering machine, I was doing this game show voice, on the you've reached the Jason Griffith show, I think was sort of the gist. It was pretty clever, though. I said, and our guests include you. We'll be right back after this message. Beep, So I think in calling me to submit me for something else, they heard that and thought, oh, Jason would be good for this commercial. So they submitted me, and I auditioned for it, ended up getting it. And as agents do, when they see you're successful at something, they roll the dice and see if you can do it again. So they kept submitting me for more stuff, and then I became the voice of JetBlue, and I did I think I got my SAG card for doing an M&M's commercial. I was the voice of the orange M&M for like a day. I can't even remember if that commercial ever ran. But then there was just, tons and tons, and again, as agents do, they submit you over and over for things that they think you can book. And that's what I happen to be booking. And, I always had a love for microphones, and I've told this story before, but every year, we grew up with relatively poor, we were on welfare when I was a kid. And so I never got the video camera I asked for every year for my birthday or Christmas, because they were, even back in the 80s, they were like $1,200.
Yeah, like the cheap ones were like $700. Like
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That was like the cheapest one you could get was $700, and still that was well beyond my budget or my parents. So every year, instead of a video camera, my dad or my mom or my grandmother, who we lived with, would buy me a cassette recorder. And I always preferred the ones that came with their own external mic. And I would just spend hours and hours recording things and then editing it. And I had a dual cassette thing where I was able to splice things together. Or one of my favorite things to do was record telephone calls, back before I knew that was illegal, without telling someone. And then, so I get everyone's side, everyone's conversation, their side, and I would splice in my own questions and sort of setups to whatever they would say. And I remember I did that for my dad once, and he absolutely loved it. And he was so proud of the fact that I did that. He would, every time he'd have a friend over or one of our relatives, he'd, Jason, go get the tape. And I'd play them the tape, and, they'd all laugh at it. And I think that really started my, love for that sort of thing, because I saw it got a reaction that made me feel like I had done something really positive, something that other people enjoyed. And I never lost that sense of wanting to make people happy, and at the same time make myself happy. And it was just something I enjoyed, that I was able to give to others that they enjoyed. So I think that mutual give and take is really what sparked my interest initially.
Yeah, because I remember as a kid, I think the first cell phone I got when I was like 12 years old, I would like record random things on it, like different voices or like just improvised stories, which going back, if I ever found those recordings, they'd probably be terrible. But
that would be amazing. Are you kidding me? I'll tell you what, dude, I still do that. I still do that. It'll be like 3 a.m. I'll be like, oh, this would be a fantastic story. And I'll just record it. And I have a couple of friends that I'll send the audio files off to. And, it's a great sort of just a creative outlet, especially now, that we can't really see each other as well as we'd like to. I think it's, keeping in touch any way you can is a great idea. But those stories are fantastic, man. I'm telling you, if you went and found those, you would find some gold. You would, you should try to find those cell phones.
Oh no, that cell phone is probably long gone. That was when I was like 2011.
Wow.
I guess because you've been involved in Sonic and Pokemon and Ninja Turtles, I don't think I was curious, like, were you ever like a fan of those as a kid or growing up?
God, yes. Yeah. In fact, I remember in 3rd grade, so this predates you. This is like 89, 90, right? The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show would come on at 4 p.m. on, was it WUAB channel? And so I would, after school, I'd sit down at the kitchen table. We had a TV in the kitchen, and I would watch, I think it was the Super Mario Brothers Power Hour or something like that, and then the Turtles, and there was another show. I think on Fridays, Legends of Zelda would be the cartoon. I was such a fan. Of that show and the video games, and with Sonic, so I always had the video game systems in the house, and my sister didn't. I think she had a Game Gear or something, some handheld thing. She also had the Game Boy. But one Christmas she got a Sega, a Genesis, and of course it came with Sonic, and so she sort of rubbed it in my face that she got that, and that was the cool game that year, and I had to ask permission to play it. But so then I always say to her now, you thought you one-upped me, but then I became Sonic. So, but yeah, God, I mean, those games are just so much fun, man. And I don't play too much, really, any games. I don't have any time these days, as a father and a husband and trying to have a career and all that comes with that. There's really not a lot of time for anything but that. But those games were just so much fun. And so yeah, long answer short, I was a fan.
Well, did you ever, like, in the later years when you actually became Sonic, like, did you ever play like some of the video games you were in?
I did. I had a brother who was born just 2 years after you. Have a brother, did have a brother. He's still here, very much so. And for Christmas, I would buy him those games. I bought him Mario and Sonic at the Olympics, and the first Sonic the Hedgehog game, which I guess is sort of called Sonic 06. I think it's just called Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, well, it's everyone refers to it as Sonic 06. So. Right.
So that game and Shadow the Hedgehog, and I played them, but again at that time I wasn't really, if I was going to sit down and play a game, it was like the new, like Super Mario Galaxy or whatever it was. I liked those kind of side-scrolling games, and these were cool, and it's cool to hear your own voice. Sometimes there was a lot of times that I would hear a cue that I had done and think, oh man, how did they leave that in? Or that, God, I thought that sounded a lot better when I did it. But that's so normal, And if I don't know how much voiceover work you've done, but sometimes when you hear yourself, especially if it's far removed, like you could hear something that someone will play back immediately and think, yeah, that's exactly how I did it. But then add 7 months to that process and listen to it then, and you'll have a completely different opinion. Just kind of going back real quick, I remember when I started doing the JetBlue ads back in 2000 or 2001. And the very first time I was hanging out with my buddy Chris in Queens, and we were watching something, and one of those commercials came on, and I went, oh, it's my commercial. And as soon as it started playing, I was like, they replaced me? Oh, man. Like, I didn't even recognize the sound of my own voice. And it took, I also did the Nicorette commercials for a while. I remember the first time I heard a Nicorette commercial, I was like, God, man, that would have been such a great commercial if they would have kept me in. And my agent's like, no, that is you. So, it's weird, So yeah, I did play those games, but again, my brother lives in Ohio, so it was usually on a trip home, and that was maybe 2 hours out of the week that I was there that I actually played that or had time to play it. But
and actually, with Sonic, I was curious because you were Shadow and you were Jet the Hawk. Now, were those also auditions, or was that like more incidental that you were cast as those?
The Shadow was an audition. I remember. I was recording Sonic X in one of the booths at 4Kids, and John Dixon, the engineer, came in and said, "Can I just grab you for a second for this audition?" And I said, "Sure." And I went in and auditioned for Shadow with him, and I think he gave me a direction, and we did it a couple times, although I can't remember what it was. And then so I ended up getting that, and I want to say it was about the same thing with Jet, but I don't recall. That could have just been something where they said, "Can you play this?" or "Let's hear what you would do with this," and they liked it on the spot. But it wasn't as time consuming a process as Sonic was with the callbacks and all. This was more, I think they were trusting the production or 4Kids to say, who they liked, I think. And I could be completely talking out of turn here, but I believe it was more just give us who you like. And they may have auditioned a few people, although I don't know. I'd like to, my thing with auditions is when I'm auditioning for something, it's always exciting to think, oh, am I the only one, or there's only me and a couple people auditioning for this? But after you get the job, after you get the part, you want to think that 500 people auditioned for it.
Well, yeah, I've had the same thing when I've auditioned for things. So.
It's such a weird thing. Like if you're in an audition with 500 people, you're like, oh man, this bites. But then if you get it, it's like, 500 people auditioned for that and I got it. It's that feeling of, you just feel special, I guess. But that comes also from auditioning for 1,000 things and only booking 2 of those. Eventually you start feeling like, man, is anything I do? Is anything gonna stick? Am I gonna book anything ever?
Oh yeah, I've had the same thought process multiple times before. Like if you don't get anything for months, you just get the mindset of, am I doing something wrong? Is there something wrong with my mic? Did I do something? Like,
I've even had, when my agent sends me auditions, sometimes I'll have the assistant, I'll EQ something 2 different ways and send it to them and say, which one sounds better to you? Because I'll keep that setting, because sometimes you don't know. It's like, is something coming through too hot, or anything you're doing, you think this could potentially turn someone off, because you have to understand that the people listening aren't necessarily engineers. They're the people that work at the ad agency or the client. And so I always think, I have a really nice mic. I was really fortunate to buy this a few years ago. And I always wonder how people could just audition on their cell phone. And my agent has told me, it's fine if you have to audition on your iPhone. It's totally fine. But I always think, if you can give yourself that extra edge with a nice mic or a nice preamp, or even just the slightest bit of EQ to like make yourself pop, that can make you stand out. And if there's 2 people they're considering and you have the better quote unquote sound, especially now that everything's being recorded at home, that could really give you the edge. You could book work that way, if you're really if you're careful and you pay attention to what's actually being put out. And it's so funny too, like I'll listen to something and think it sounds completely different. I'll send it to my agent, and the assistant will get back and be like, there's so little difference between those two takes. Like, submit whichever one you want.
Yeah, because I've had the same thing where I've recorded 4 takes, and there'll be a point where even I listen back to all 4 of them, and I'll be like, they don't sound any different. They don't sound any different to me at all. Like,
yeah, I had a and what Michael, what are you auditioning for? Is it mostly animation?
Animation. I've got a couple games.
Great.
Not like big console games, but like indie web things or things like that.
Yeah, man, those are awesome though. Those are tons of fun too. And I feel like, the more independent it is, the more leeway you have to be creative as opposed to sort of following someone else's vision.
Oh yeah, I was first game I did, I was 2 characters. I forget what. I think it was like a StarCraft type game.
Oh, cool.
And I was like the ship engineer and a character that only appeared in like cutscenes.
Oh, that's still cool, man. That's so cool.
Yeah. And the other one has not come out yet, so I don't actually know if I'm allowed to say anything.
Yeah, best not to then. I had, and here's the thing with the take sounding different, and this is something I learned sort of the hard way. And at the time, it really sucked. But I auditioned for, I want to say it was like one of the ketchup brands, and I went in for
like
casting
Heinz.
Like it was one of them. It was either that or I think it was Heinz. I think it was, and auditioned, and it was one of these things where it was like, all right, do it again, give us another take, give us something else, and like you do with 99% of auditions, you do it and you forget about it and you never hear about it. So I went in for this casting director again about a month later, thinking she didn't even remember me. And she said, you almost got that Heinz job. It was a campaign. Would have been like a 6-figure job.
Oh my God.
I know. And she said, you know why you didn't? And I said, why? She's like, your takes sounded too similar. And I was like, and this was years ago before I really started considering like, all right, if you do multiple takes, just give them something different. They don't want to just hear if you could do the same thing again. Sometimes they do, but they'll be specific about that. And she's like, yeah, the person who got it gave them this, the darker one, and then the brighter one, and then the whatever it was, the more smiley one. And I had no idea. And for her to tell me that, it was like so crushing at the moment. But then you stop and think, that 99% of the time that you don't hear anything, sometimes you get really close, or sometimes what you're doing is really good, but it's just they want a female instead of a male, or they want, someone with more bass in their voice as opposed to tenor. And they don't necessarily, and by they don't necessarily, I mean, they never reach out to you and tell you were really close. So you're sort of just left in this limbo feeling of, man, do all my auditions just fly out into the universe and dissipate and nobody listens to them? It just feels like you're throwing your takes into a black hole sometimes. But, people remember you. I just did a job for another commercial company. I can't talk about it because it's not airing yet. But, and I auditioned for these people all over and over and over, never heard anything. And finally auditioned and got the job and recorded the first 2 spots. And I just remember the woman saying, we trust you, Jason, because you're fabulous. We've heard from you over X amount of months or whatever. And I had no idea. Sometimes when you're auditioning for people, I almost feel like if you don't get 5 of those jobs, they're still listening and saying, we really like Jason, bring him back, get him another audition for this. We really like that, but we can't use him. So, but you never know. So you just think, I'm floating in space and there's nothing to tether me to reality here. And you just sometimes, and then that's where the deceptive thoughts don't help whatsoever. If we're thinking, God, I suck, or I must suck. And, really you're getting really close, and you just have to have faith. And I think that's it. I really think the key ingredient is faith that you're good enough. And especially if people are requesting things of you, that, it's not like some giant game where you're, just being toyed with for years and years, although it feels like it. Sometimes it's always best to just do your best work and forget about it and be pleasantly surprised when you book a job.
I think there's a big internet animation that came out last year called Has Been Hotel, and I remember I auditioned for that years ago, like three, 4 years ago maybe, and I remember I'm friends with several people that are involved in the production, and I remember talking to one of the writers and I guess producer, and he told me apparently I got in like the top 5
Oh yeah,
for a role like in it, and I'm like, oh
yep.
I hate that you told me that, but at the same time, like,
you know what's funny, Michael?
oh.
It's so funny that you say that, because when okay, so and I'm not sure how it works outside of commercial voiceovers, but for the most part with commercial auditions, if you are being considered, they put you on hold, and then more times than not you just get released and they hire someone else, because that's the name of the game. But those few times that you do get the job, it's great, but it's almost, even though it's better that you were put on hold because you did a great job and people loved your voice, it's almost better to not get put on hold, or it almost feels better to not get put on hold and just forget about a job, as opposed to get put on hold and then released, because you really feel like, oh, I'm getting so close, and then it's you get your hopes up, and it's such a strange thing, because you'd think, oh, I hope I get into that short list every single time. I hope every single time I audition that people are considering me this closely. But then when you get the release notice, it's almost doubly cruel, because
that's the thing, because I was like, I've had it's a double-edged sword, because I had friends tell me, well, that tells me you were that good because you made it to the top 5, but at the same time I'm like, yeah, but I made it to the top 5, I didn't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Top 5 doesn't pay the bills, man.
Yeah. Where it's like, I don't want to say I'm being selfish, but it's just like I'm told that, and I'm like, I got so close.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, I just want to mention, I don't know how long it's been, but for everyone listening, Michael has been asking me to be on this podcast for how many years now?
Oh yeah, I didn't know if you would actually notice.
Dude, I absolutely did, and I want to apologize, for, and I always see the request, and it's never a matter of just blowing someone off. It's always a matter of, when am I going to have time and to properly and be in the right headspace to talk, So I do want to acknowledge that.
So let me explain. So I took hiatuses, a long hiatus from doing these interviews for a few years, and back in, I think, 2014, I messaged you, and I think we worked something out, and then something didn't. I guess I don't know what it was, because again, we messaged each other and we worked something out, and then I guess plans fell through. And like a month ago, I was thinking again, like, I should try it again. Like, now that I'm doing my podcast again.
I'm looking back right now. The first one was December 11th, 2014.
Yeah.
Man, I'm sorry. I was a whole different person back then. I was still living in Times Square in 2014.
I mean, again, I don't hold it against you. I've had people.
Oh no, yeah, I hope
that's
not.
The thing. I don't. No. I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I'm like, you never got back to me. I don't hold it against you. Like,
well, I give you credit, man, for being persistent.
I actually give you credit that you responded, because I've had people who I have seen, they saw the message, but they never said anything. Like that. Mm-hmm. I've had people do that before, and that hurts a lot more than just saying no or plans falling through.
Well, I do get a quite a bit of quite a few invites to do interviews, and I really don't unless I know the person, or I don't know, unless it seems a little more legit, I usually don't accept, because I can't do 50 interviews a day, and I just don't think I'm that interesting when it comes to it's like, listen, everybody has their unique story, and if I were in people's position where I wanted to be a voice actor, I would love this shit. I've always loved interviews, but at a certain point, I'm like, how much, I don't know who has unique questions, or who has, something that I haven't answered already. and just it struck me that maybe you did, or might be someone I could trust to put together something professional. And I actually listened to your interview with Mark Thompson, and I thought, all right, this guy knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah, well again, I've been doing it technically for like 6 years, so I've interviewed probably like 30 plus people, I think. In those 6 years. So like, I want to say I'm good at it, but
yeah, no, you are. You're great, man, and you have a great voice for this thing too. So I expect you'll have a lot of success if you keep at it.
Oh, I'm touched.
Yeah,
but I guess one more question that I'm interested in, because, well, unfortunately, you are not the voice of Sonic or Shadow anymore. Characters like that. I guess. What is it like seeing the franchise go on when you are not the voice anymore of the character that you played for so long?
In the beginning, when it first happened, it was it's heartbreaking, because something that, well, let's put it this way: everything that Sonic provided for me career-wise was incredible, and I made a lot of connections, and I was able to branch off and do other things, meet other directors, and continue my career. So for that, I'm wholly and completely grateful. However, when something that it's like your baby in a way,
Yeah.
Even though I didn't create the dialogue, I didn't create the character, it's still something that people associated me with. And it's a point of pride. You can tell your friends back home, I'm Sonic, isn't that cool? So in that sense, it's like losing something you loved. But as time goes on with everything, you lose that feeling of that deep connection. I'm honestly, Michael, I'm still so surprised and baffled that people reach out to me and tell, and tell me how much they loved my performance to this day. I really thought this would, when I stopped doing it, I think in 2010 or 29, whatever it was.
Yeah, I think it was 2010.
I really thought, all right, well, that's it. I'm not going to hear from anybody anymore. And, which at the time was fine, because I was getting a lot of negative comments where I'm like, I don't need this. Like, like I'm just trying to do my best job, and, and take everyone's suggestions into consideration as far as the director and the producer. And but now that I'm super happy that someone like Roger's able to do it for so long, because it's a great gig, man. And if he enjoys doing it and people enjoy what he's doing, there's nothing wrong with that. And I know this is a really bad analogy, but there's those I want to say they're like monks or Buddhists that do these amazing sand like creations where they pour sand for like days and days to make this beautiful landscape, and then they just destroy it. Then they just, and that's sort of what it feels like. It's like you can do some great work, but at the end of the day, you just have to let it go. And if it brings happiness and good fortune to other people, that's almost better than hanging on to it for yourself all this time. And and again, with something like Sonic, maybe it has to evolve. Maybe it can't just be my voice or Ryan's voice or Jaleel White's voice forever. Maybe it has to evolve, because that's the nature of Sonic. Something like The Simpsons, you can't have anybody but all of those actors playing those characters without it feeling different. But with something like a video game and new people new kids and fans being exposed to it all the time, it's just like music. I read a great article once on Cyndi Lauper and Madonna and how they were like head and head. What's the word?
Head to head.
Head to head, like in the 80s, like for who was more popular. But Madonna ultimately won out because she was able to evolve her sound as the years passed, whereas Cyndi Lauper sort of stayed, you think Cyndi Lauper's, you just think 80s. You don't think, oh yeah, Cyndi Lauper's 2001 album. I don't even know if that exists, but sometimes just the evolution keeps something fresh and alive. And so in that sense, I agree with getting new voices if they're needed. And it would be selfish of me to say it should be me. It should only be me. Listen, I would love to do it, and if I were asked to do it, for sure. Like who would turn something like that down? But at the same time, I'm not bitter. I've learned to accept it. I will say though, when I was commuting on the LA transit here and seeing those huge Sonic signs, a little part of me saw those signs and the huge posters and the murals, and I'm like, how fucking cool would it be if I were still doing that right now? But it just isn't. So you learn to accept the things you can't change, and there's something else to go along with that saying that I can't remember.
I mean, you're working in LA now, so maybe there's a possibility they could find a way to sneak you into a Sonic project at some point. So
sure. Hey, listen, nothing's impossible, but I tend to think, being more proactive with your career is the way to go, as opposed to hoping that something like that were to come along. And, never in a million years would I be like, all right, here's my campaign to take over the role again. Because that would just be it would suck. And it would reflect poorly on me, and it would reflect like I was in some sort of competition with. And listen, a lot of people have lost their jobs to be replaced by other voice actors over the years. And I think some people are bitter about it, and some people are like, it still should be me. And I just don't take that approach, because my mantra for a long time has been there's enough work for everybody, including me. And, one role isn't more important than another role at the time of doing it. When you're doing a part, you should just be completely invested in that moment and creating what you need to right then and there, and not thinking of, is there going to be longevity? Am I going to be able to sustain this over years? It's like, man, you're getting it wrong. Then you just need to be in the moment and be grateful for the job you have, whatever it is, and do your best. And, that's really what gets you hired again.
Yeah. Again, it's just interesting because there's also the Sonic movie, because that came out this year.
How was it?
I liked it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a really fun movie.
Yeah.
Because it was another thing I was actually curious about, if you had seen that or if you'd really shown much interest.
No, and not that it's just, again, I have a kid, and, times that my wife and I can even, like, really, back when I was single or dating Melissa, if we weren't seeing each other every day, it was easier to go to a movie by myself. And I love going to see movies by myself, but that's no longer an issue.
Right now, no.
Well, especially not now, but after having Austin and getting married, it's like it feels selfish if you just go out by yourself. So if we do go out, I think the last time we saw a movie together was Knives Out. It was around Valentine's Day, and it was I don't even remember if there was a moment where I was like, oh, we could go see the Sonic movie. And it was like, or we could go see something else. So it's just, and again, another thing is I've never been a huge action movie fan, and I can't even say if the Sonic movie is action, but.
And more like a buddy cop road trip movie. Like,
okay. Then that's kind of cool. But like the extent, like I love The Matrix. The first Matrix is one of my favorite movies. I think that's, I love to go see movies that are weird, and like my wife will definitely disagree with me on this point, but I like to see movies that just like make you uncomfortable or make you really think about like adaptation, being John Malkovich. Those type of movies are always on my radar.
So not like horror, but more like a psychological thriller.
Hey,
type thing,
I'll go see a horror if there's great performances in a horror movie. Yeah, man, I'm there. But as far as like, Hobbs and Shaw or something that there's just going to be gunfire and, I've never, ever been a fan of those movies. Not because I don't like them, but just because I have interest elsewhere. I really like watching performances that sort of reflect human nature. And I like being surprised by human interaction, as opposed to, I was so surprised when he jumped off the Empire State Building and he lived, like it just doesn't, I'm like, I don't know. I have a friend who is a huge Star Wars fan. And I went to his place in Tennessee to do a play with him a few years back. I was there for about a month, and one of the new Star Wars came out, and I can't remember which one it was. And he's like, all right, I know you're not a fan, but we're going to go see this movie, and it's going to change your life. And this is the 15th time I've seen it, and I'm telling you, like, so excited. And I think I fell asleep within the first 10 minutes. I felt someone shaking me, like, are you watching this? I don't know, man. There's like a trigger in me that, like, I stop paying attention when it's just all when it's all special effects and explosions and stuff, man. I just, like, I tune out. I start thinking about my day. I start thinking about, I've got other things to do.
What did I do to get to this point today?
Right. Yeah, no. All right. I woke up. All right. I had a corn muffin. Yeah. So I don't know. As far as the movie, I'll probably see it at some point, but that's because I really like Jim Carrey.
So you're less of a Terminator 2 and more like the first Terminator kind of person.
I'm less of a Matrix 2 and 3 and more of a Matrix, just the Matrix. Yeah.
Or
yeah.
I was originally going to say you're less of a Predator person and more of a Total Recall person.
I'm definitely not a Predator, but Total Recall, yeah.
In my head, I thought that would be a bad thing to say at the time.
So just to give you an example, I've and not to say like any of the Marvel movies aren't great. Like I love Robert Downey Jr. in the Iron Man franchise. I really do. I think he's fantastic. But I could watch Robert Downey Jr. in anything. Right now, I was telling my buddy Aaron, sort of my comic book TV show right now, and people will maybe not understand this unless they've seen it, but it's Better Call Saul. Like I'm watching Better Call Saul right now, and the way it's shot. And those characters, like, that is the type of comic book that I would read. That's the kind of comic book. I don't need the guy in the cape or the guy with the shield or the guy flying around. And I know that's probably people are gonna hate me for saying that, but like I'd rather read a comic book or watch a comic book type show like that because it's closer to real, just real human interaction. That's all. I've always been interested in that. I've always been a fan of the human element. So
more like a character study than like a full-on action movie kind of thing.
Totally, 100%.
Have you seen Birdman actually?
I saw it in the theater.
Oh,
loved
it. Such a good movie. That's like one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, and there was one scene where they filmed on a rooftop, and I watched it. I'm like, oh, I can see that rooftop from my window in my apartment. And like, sure enough, I went and I looked. I'm like, yep, that's right where they filmed when I lived in Times Square. It was such a trip, man. But
look out the window. Oh God, Michael Keaton's still over there.
Right? Is he waiting for something? Maybe I should go bring him a corn muffin. Yeah, no, Birdman was fantastic. I loved Birdman.
All right, but I gotta say, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, of course, man. I'm really, I'm a fan of your work, and I think you do a great job.
Oh, thank you. Is there anything you want to promote? Anything going on?
Boy, I don't. I'd love to promote the commercial I just did, but I can't even talk about it until it starts airing, and then I don't even know if I can talk about it. I would like to promote the fact that I will be in a commercial. My voice in several commercials, and if anybody can point it out and figure out who I am or which commercial it is, I will tell you if you're right or wrong. And I've been since I moved to LA, I've been working a lot on doing ADR for film and TV. So I just worked on a pretty big film. On Friday, we actually got to go into the studio, which was, because they started to ease a lot of the restrictions, and they separated us into individual rooms, which was just a strange thing, man. Because when you do these sessions, a lot of times it's 12 people in a room all at once, but you just can't do that right now.
Yeah.
So that was cool, and I'm looking forward to this movie coming out. I can't even talk about it, but I think it comes out on Christmas this year. Yeah, and here's the other kind of cool thing. I booked 4 films on camera during quarantine from self-tapes.
Wow.
So 2 of them, one of them I'll be shooting in July, another one I'll be shooting in August, and then there are 2 others that are still up in the air. One I have to fly up to San Francisco to do. But so those, when those come out, I'll definitely be promoting the hell out of those. But it's nice to know I have, because I'll tell you, Michael, the reason Melissa and I really moved out here, aside from just wanting our son to be able to be near his grandparents and be able to go outside, and thank God we're here now. And this time I couldn't imagine being in New York right now. We actually have space here, to walk and breathe air and all that good stuff. The other reason is because, I didn't, as much as I love voiceovers, and I hope I do them until the day my career is over. I really, really have a love for on camera, film and TV. And so it's really great to have this pause where I was able to up my self-tape game, where I'm taping for these shows. And it's crazy, man. I had 100% response rate to every audition I sent in during quarantine, either a callback or a booking. And, just to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, where once this is over, and even as quickly as next month, fingers crossed that everything stays on the same path, but that I'll be able to start shooting things. At least gives me a little bit of hope that things will be okay.
Yeah, because I remember I interviewed Brian Beacock, and I remember him telling me about he was doing stand-in work for the new Matrix movie, which I thought was real. Yeah. No, he said it was like the first live-action stuff he had done in a while, and he said he was doing like stand-in work for one of the actors in the new Matrix. I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Amazing. What a great gig. What a great. I have a friend who does stand-in work for was it Will and Grace? Yeah, Will and Grace. And he always posts pictures of him on set, and once in a while they'll throw him into an episode where he'll have a line or two, and it's just got to be such a cool gig. It beats the hell out of waiting tables, man. And not to put down waiting tables, because you could make a bunch of money doing that, or bartending, but if you can be in the industry and work at least closely to what you would like to do for the rest of your life, that's there's nothing better than that. When I first moved to New York, I worked at Barnes & Noble for about a year, and I really thought I'd love it because I love books and I love reading, and I loved Barnes & Noble, and I hated that job with a passion, because people would just like, well, I got my 57 books here, and I'm just going to stick them there in the corner, and you clean them up. And so that's what I'd have to do every minute of the day, is like, are you cleaning up your floor? I'm like, I'm using the bathroom. I just need a second to rest. So anyway, after that, I was hired to be an audience usher for every single sitcom, every audience sitcom in New York. So I got to see like Whoopi Goldberg's sitcom, and Kelly Ripa's sitcom, Jim Gaffigan's sitcom, Parker Posey's, Gabriel Byrne had a sitcom, and I just got to walk the audience to their seats, hand out pizza, and take people to the bathroom. But even though it was like a, not a meaningless job, but a menial job in a way, it still was like an acting class every Friday or every Tuesday whenever they shot, because I got to watch 6 hours of them tape this sitcom. And, you feel almost like it's that much closer, because you're only like 6 feet away from the action. You're like, all I have to do is hop over this little gate, get in front of the camera, and I'm on TV. But it doesn't work that way, although it feels like it, and it gives you a lot of hope. So my advice to anybody is that wants to work in this business is just try to, don't feel like any job is under you, unless it's someone's putting you in a compromising situation, obviously, or something that makes you uncomfortable, really. But, even getting people coffee or handing out pizza sometimes can lead to bigger and better things. My buddy and I were, and this is not really a leading to better things sort of thing, but my buddy and I were working on the set of Hope and Faith, and we both looked cool back then. And I remember one of the producers came up to me and was like, the extras they sent over for the cool lunch table in this scene all look like nerds, so can you guys put on these clothes and just sit at this table? So we got to be in the scene.
We get two cool guys in this table full of geeks.
Right. And dude, here's a story I've never told. This is a Michael exclusive.
Oh,
I am still under the impression that I got hit on by Megan Fox when I was working on that show. And here's how little game I have. And this is totally true. I was standing at the audience entrance, just, doing my thing, waiting for people's bladders to fill up so I could bring them to the bathroom. And Megan Fox walks up to me, and like 3 other pages next to me. And she's like, "Hey, I hear you do a really mean Elvis." And I was like, my response should have been like, "Well, who said that, pretty mama?" Something stupid like that. And instead I was like, "Who told you that?" And she pointed over to like the bullpen where all the managers and stuff sit. And there's a woman with like a reindeer on her sweater. And she's like, "Her?" So I walk away from Megan Fox. I don't even say anything. I just walk to this woman to go see who she is. And I don't even remember who she was. And later on, like, my friend came up to me. He's like, "Dude, you just walked away from Megan Fox. She was talking to you." I was like, "Yeah, I know. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable." So that, and I think the next week, or like the following, maybe a couple weeks later, Brian Austin Green was on the show, and that's who she ended up marrying.
Right. Yeah.
So, how true that, how much of that story was her actually, I couldn't think of any other reason she'd come over to me and ask me about me doing Elvis in the way she did. I was like, I don't know. I told my wife that story for the first time the other day, and she's like, "You're such an idiot." She didn't say that. But she was like, "Really? You just walked away from her?" Oh, okay.
And this was like what, mid 2000s? Like I assume like pre-Transformers, like that kind of stuff.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, this was her first. Like, it was the second season of Hope and Faith, whenever that was. Because the first season they had a different actress playing the daughter who was fantastic, but I don't know if she didn't look the part or she got a different job or whatever. So the second season they replaced her with Megan Fox, and Megan was great, but they were both two talented actors who gave a different spin to the one role.